One of the best ways to feel comfortable when it comes to doing the IELTS test is to know exactly what to do. In today's video, we look at a very simple structure that we can apply to all Task 2 introductions. Let's get straight into it. Welcome, my name is Eli and today we're focusing on Task 2 introductions. Let's have a look at the slides. So a Task 2 introduction should simply do two things. Introduce the topic and respond to the question. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, it just needs to do these two things. 2 to 4 sentences is enough. Let's have a look at an example. Here is a typical Task 2 question. It's an agree or disagree question. Teenagers should have regular exams at secondary school as this will prepare them better for life after leaving school. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Let's have a look at what one of our students wrote for this question. First of all, they introduced the topic. Exams are an important feature of secondary education. However, there is contention over whether they prepare students for post-school life. So what they have done is they have taken the topic of the question and they have introduced the topic in their own words. After that, they respond to the question. I would argue that teenagers should be given regular exams at secondary school as this will help them to be prepared for their academic and professional life after they have left school. So here they respond to the question by giving their opinion. Let's look at each of these 2 points in a bit more detail. First of all, there are different ways to introduce the topic. Have a look at this question. Research shows that business meetings and business training are increasingly taking place online. Do the advantages of this development outweigh the disadvantages? Now, the first way that we can introduce the topic is to have a comparison with the past. Here's an example. In the past, business meetings and training seminars were usually held in person on the company premises. Nowadays, they are frequently being held online. So here we have 2 sentences that introduce the topic of business meetings being held online. And they follow a very simple structure. They have in the past, and then a verb phrase, and then a new sentence, nowadays, and then a verb phrase. Now, many IELTS questions compare the past to the present. It's very typical of IELTS. So this is a very useful structure that you can use in many T2 introductions. But there are other structures. We might want to talk about a development or a state. Nowadays, it is becoming increasingly common for business meetings to be held online rather than in person. The structure, well, we have a time phrase like nowadays, over the last century, in recent decades, and then we have a verb phrase. Again, very simple, but very useful for a lot of Task 2 introductions. We also have a contrasting opinion, and again, this is very useful because many of the Task 2 questions, such as discussion questions or advantage and disadvantage questions, have differing opinions and you need to decide which one you agree with. So let's have a look at a useful structure. Many people believe that the shift from face-to-face to online business meetings and training is a negative development. Others argue, including myself, that it has increased convenience and productivity, and it is therefore a positive development. Let's look at the structure. Well, they have many people believe, and then the verb phrase, then a full stop, and then others argue, or I would argue, and then a verb phrase. Let's have a look at another example of a contrasting opinion structure. It is firmly acknowledged that business meetings and training seminars are being held online. However, there is less consensus on whether this is a positive development. This introduces the topic very well. We have, it is firmly acknowledged, or we could say it is widely believed that, and then a verb phrase, and then however, there is less consensus on, or however, what is less clear, and then a verb phrase. So you should experiment with these different structures in your task 2 essays and find out which ones you like and which ones you can use when it comes to your IELTS exam. Okay, let's have a closer look at the grammar that we use when introducing the topic. So, to talk about general statements and facts, we use the present simple. Exams are an important feature of secondary school education. However, if we talk about recent changes, we would use the present perfect. Over the last decade, exams have become much more prevalent in high schools. Finally, if we want to talk about things that are changing right now, we would use the present continuous. The stress that young people are put under in high school is constantly rising. So is rising is the present continuous. So when you're writing your introduction, pay attention to which time frame you're talking about and make sure you're using the right grammatical tense. Okay. Now let's focus a bit more on responding to the question. Now we said that this should be about 1 to 2 sentences. And what we need to do here is show the examiner that we have understood the question. As a result, you need to be very careful about using synonyms. Now remember, synonyms are different words that mean the same thing. If we get the wrong synonym in our introduction, then the examiner might think that we don't understand the question. This is a very common mistake for many students, and as a result, many students get a lower score for task achievement than they deserve. Have a look at this example. So this is the question, and here are two different sentences responding to the question. Which one is correct and which one is incorrect? Have a look at the word that's underlined. This one is incorrect. Children and teenagers are not the same. So don't use a synonym if it's not a synonym. Or rather, be careful when you're using a synonym. You don't want to get this wrong. It's better just to use the same words than to use the wrong word and as a result get a lower score. That's what this student has done. They've just simply written teenagers. So even though they've used the same word as the question, because it's the same word, the examiner knows that they've understood the question correctly. Sometimes instead of using synonyms, a good idea is to change the grammatical structure of the sentence. And that's what's been done here. If you look at the question, we have after leaving school, and if we look in these introductions, we have after they have left school. So changing the grammar is a good way of changing the question, but making sure that the meaning is still the same. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's continue talking about how we respond to the question. When we respond to the question, we often have to express our opinion. For example, at the end of this question, it says, to what extent do you agree or disagree? Now, most IELTS questions ask for your opinion, and here are some useful phrases you can use. In my opinion, overall, I would argue or I would say that. However, in my opinion, personally, I think, in my view, I am in favor of the idea of, I am completely against the idea of. So these are all phrases that you can use to introduce your opinion when you respond to the question. You might want to partially agree, and here are some other useful phrases. Take into account. I think regular exams do prepare teenagers for life after school, but we should take into account how those exams are carried out. Provided. I think that regular exams do prepare teenagers for life after school, provided that they are carried out in a sensible way. It depends on. I think that regular exams do prepare teenagers for life after school, but realize that it depends on how those exams are carried out. Now, if you decide to go down this route and you partially agree, make sure that in your body paragraphs you cover why you partially agree. So for example, when you say, it depends on how the exams are carried out, well, what do you mean? How can an exam be carried out in a way that doesn't help students prepare for post-school life? And how can exams be carried out in a way that does prepare students for post-school life? You would need to cover that in the body paragraphs. Okay, now when we respond to the question, we need to check to see if we are answering a double question. So nowadays, more and more people are moving from rural areas to cities for work opportunities. What kind of problems can this trend cause? What could be done to solve these problems? Now, when we respond to a question that is a double question, like a problem and solution, I suggest that you use an outline statement. And this makes it very clear to the examiner that you're going to address both questions. Here's an example. This essay will first look at what problems result from rural to urban migration and then outline what can be done to solve these problems. So this is how you would respond to a question or respond to a double question in your introduction. Let's have a look at another example. Okay, so the question is, nowadays it is becoming increasingly common for family members to live in different countries which are very far from each other. What are the reasons for this? Do the advantages of this trend outweigh the disadvantages? And this student has written, this essay will first discuss the reasons for family members being spread out in different countries, and then outline why I feel that this is a positive trend. So here they have done two things. They've outlined their essay and they've given their opinion, which is what this question asks for. Okay, the structure. We can say this essay will first, and then, or first, this essay will, and secondly. This is a good way to outline what will be in our essay. Let's summarize. An introduction should do two things. Introduce the topic and respond to the question. There are different ways to introduce the topic. We can have a comparison with the past, a development of state, and a contrasting opinion. And you should experiment with them in your task 2 practice essays before you go to the test. Here is some useful grammar for introducing topics. Use the present simple for general statements, the present perfect for recent changes, the present continuous for things that are changing right now, and when it comes to responding to the question, remember to give your opinion if the question asks for your opinion, be very careful with synonyms, and finally use an outline statement for double questions. Right, I hope that has made writing introductions clearer for you. It's a very good idea to practice writing introductions because you do not want to be spending a lot of time writing them in your task 2 answer. Remember, you only really have 35 to 40 minutes for this. The quicker you can write your introduction, the better. And that way you can move straight on to your body paragraphs. Okay, best of luck with your studies, and I'll see you next time.